Why do we need to know about early child brain development? First of all, every one of us want to have our children to have the best in their life in terms of education, wealth, health, literacy. But then there are things that happen when we feel that we have not optimized it and that the child is not growing at the optimal level. Whenever a newborn is born, they learn to adapt and survive in their surroundings, within the family unit, and from the environment and in the community. We are all the distillate of our own culture and what we experience in life. And that influences how a child grows in its own environment. The most important thing is, if every child is born the same way, the natural instinct of a child is intuition, memory, persistence, perseverance, love, sympathy, empathy, and believe me, they have robust memory. You could say one thing today, and if you want to change it the next day, the child will remind you what you have said. So, every child is born to learn. The most important learning that ultimately determines the literacy, cognitive development, intellectual capabilities is social emotional learning. Therefore, we have to protect those emotions from adverse environmental and adverse community experiences. So, we all think that a child is pre-cooked in the uterus and that the child is born with a genetic frame, and those blueprints determine how the child is going to be. But the modern neuroscience and extensive literature and behavioral workup in the last 3 decades or 30 years tell us that is not true. A child is born as an embryo. By 4.5 months of pregnancy, there are 100 billion nerve cells that migrate to where the future brain would be, and in its pathway pulls out the spinal cord. But if in the first 3 to 6 months of pregnancy, if mother did drugs, alcohol, or was exposed to viral or parasitic infections, or had a nutritional deficiency, the number of the cells may be compromised, but not less than 80 billion cells at birth. The impact will be there on the neural tube defects if there have been certain vitamin deficiencies, like B10 deficiency or folic acid deficiency. So, it is very, very critical that from the time the parents are planning for an infant, they should pay utmost attention to what they are taking and what they are consuming, and about the nutrition and a very well balanced organic meal. That is very important. When the child is born, there are 100 billion cells. They are floating like stars in the sky in the cerebrospinal fluid. It is through the 5 senses there will be sensory integration, and a wire is going to be formed between nerve cell to nerve cell, at least 10,000 nerve connections between each nerve cell to nerve cell, if there is a sensory perception. If there is no sensory perception, if they tune out, instead of connecting 250,000 cells per minute times 10,000, 600,000 cells per minute die times 10,000. That leaves a big gap between the anatomy or the structure of the brain and the functional units of the brain. It is definite that these changes are permanent. It is like when you are building a house, you wire up the system and those wires cannot be seen. You have a beautiful chandelier and you have a light switch, but the wires that is connecting the light switch that represents the senses to the beautiful chandelier that is the personality, if there is miscommunication or a short circuit, things do not work, but the wires will not be seen. In a similar fashion, the internal wiring, which is called as hard wiring, is a permanent part of the brain structure, and they happen for the first time when the infant experiences the world. If this world or the environment or the primary caretakers are exposing the infant to either media violence, domestic violence, toxic stress, too many infections, poor nourishment and nutrition, there is a vulnerable period when the changes that happen can cause a permanent damage in the structure of the brain and the functional units of the brain. This is a genuine concern. This is where we, the pediatricians, the general practitioners and the doctors have to focus 0 to 3 years of age, where we can be preventive by creating networks and the wiring system that is well balanced between inhibitory and excitatory systems, so that there is good visual tracking, visual spatial reasoning, auditory tracking or hearing, and auditory spatial reasoning that helps the mathematical reasoning, music, natural intuition enriched, inquisitiveness enriched, memory enhanced, mathematical skills, linguistic skills or ability to learning language can be promoted, and self-regulation, self-confidence. All these are important parts of a human personality development, and instant gratification should be controlled. If we take an example of lazy eye, if the eyes do not see very well, both of them open together, the lazy eye, if it is not corrected under 18 months of age, between 9 to 18 months of age, there is a permanent loss of vision. This is called as suppression amblyopia. If a child does not hear very well because of many ear infections, and if they are hearing muffled noises, that can also interfere with the hearing capabilities. When there are loud noises, infants do not know how to close their ears and run away. They tune out. When they tune out, they lose the capacity to process hearing, and this can happen with ear infections, fluid buildup in the ears, parent fighting, loud noises, hip hop music that is very loud that can suppress hearing capabilities. Infants do very well when you do mother is, father is, that is soft noises. It is a different information when you say hello, how are you, but when a mother turns to the infant, immediately it becomes musical. Hi, how are you? Is it a good morning today? Is it a nice day today? It's going to be a learning day today. But there will be a difference when the way the infant perceives this, instead of the mother saying, are you learning today? Is it a good day today? There will be a complete inhibition or suppression of secretions. It is true if the baby is not touched very well, there will be no sensory integration, and we are losing pathways of calming and soothing, because touch is most important aspect of a child's calming down effect, bonding that can be enhanced with the mother. Same thing with the eye tracking. The soul of a being can be expressed through the eyes. You can see a dog and a cat that is afraid of you when you threaten them. Similarly, infants and human beings also at any age group. When there is an infant looking into the mother's eye, that reserve and reciprocity is very important for the mother to look back, smile, make the eye contact, so it is reassuring for the infant. The multisensory integration gets better only with a person who is able to bond with them, who is able to give reciprocity, who is able to give positive feedback. Otherwise, sticking a child in front of a television, or if they are just hearing alone the rhymes, they will not be appreciated or integrated. Television cannot, or an iPad or an iPhone cannot teach, because it does not make sense for them. They do not see very well, they do not know the meaning. Instead, if a primary caretaker gives emotional bonding, reinforces with a smile, touches the infant, is singing a lullaby or a rhyme, that is integrated very well. And there are certain principles of multisensory integration, where the stimulus has to come from a constant place with a temporal space and with a certain frequency that has a calming effect. Then there will be a sensory integration. If that does not happen, the child does not integrate the senses. Therefore, music does a lot more wonders for an infant to learn, to listen, to get spatial reasoning. The right side of the brain connects to all of these, but the perception is always by the left side of the brain. Peace, calmness, happiness, communication skills, they all come from the left side of the brain. Mathematical reasoning, geography, spatial reasoning, all rhythms, tempos, rhymes come through the right side of the brain. If both the right and the left sides of the brain connect very well, you have a child who is able to express. Because in the whole creation, we are the only ones who can have the capacity to express our emotions, who can listen, who can reason, who can think, who can read and write. Whereas the rest of the creation is unable to do, we are able to do that because of the prefrontal gyrus that sits in between the eyebrows, and that sits on the eye sockets. This is called as the frontal lobe, which is only a human properties. Apes can walk, their hands are set free, but they cannot communicate, they cannot respond, but they can only react, because they are lacking the frontal lobe. So, any one of the experiences that cause toxic stress, anxiety, violence, exposure to violence, loud noises, lack of nurture will cause sensory segregation, not integration. I hope the scans that were projected will make sense to you. This scan shows a replication of no redness or activity at 1 month of age. This represents 100 billion cells. As the primary caretaker is talking, feeding, changing, answering, that infant develops sense of security and connects with the middle brain, and that is shown in the 3-month scan. And if between this 1 month to 3 months, if there is an inebriation, drugs and alcohol, and the mother or the primary caretaker is not paying attention, the infant stops crying and withdraws, and then there is a depression already, the roots for depression, and not focusing and not looking. Between 3 months to 6 months, the infant is connecting to this frontal lobe, and that is what is seen towards the front, which is very important for social, emotional learning and critical thinking and abstract reasoning, memory and recall. And that is rapidly happening. That is when the permanent memories of sense of security, anxiety or self-trust and worth can be instilled. This is when the child cries a lot when they are left alone, and it is a silly thinking that they cannot survive without mom touching them. It is only the primary caretaker who can make this child learn that they can be left alone and they can learn from the environment. The anxiety, neurosis, attachment disorder start as soon as 6 months when they are recognizing strangers. By 9 months, there are more changes happening in all the systems, which is the immune system, blood systems, digestive system, and critical thinking, reasoning, social emotional learning. They cannot process, but they can understand, and they are developing rapidly language skills between 5 to 6 months to 9 months. If an infant is spoken in the native language, they learn that language as well as a foreign language when one person speaks one language, and if the other parent speaks the other language. But if one person with their pitch and frequency change between the languages, no language is picked up. The brain is considered as a digital analog, and this representation into the brain kind of prevents the sensory integration, stores at different places, and the infant does not learn any language. Therefore, these are some of the facts that every parent should learn, so that we do take care of our children. In the next sessions, I will explain how to use the SAI Educare Universal Nurture that incorporates multisensory integration to give the spatial reasoning, visual tracking, memory, motivation, and inquisitiveness, hands-on activities, motor skills, and self-regulation. Thank you.